What would you do if you saw a child's hand pressing against the ice from underneath a frozen lake, with only 5 minutes of air left before they drowned? That's exactly what happened to Navy SEAL veteran Axel Thompson when what should have been a peaceful morning walk with Ranger turned into the most desperate rescue of his life. But what 7-year-old Emma Chen was doing under that ice alone, and why her disappearance had gone unnoticed for 6 hours, would expose a family secret that shook an entire Montana community to its core. This is the true story of a child who fell through thin ice into a nightmare, a search and rescue dog whose instincts defied physics, and a race against hypothermia that proved sometimes miracles come in the form of refusing to give up when everyone else says it's too late. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments, and if you believe that some rescues require more than training, they require faith, hit that like button. You're going to need every bit of hope you have for this one. Now let's begin. February in Montana tested even the most experienced outdoorsmen. The temperature hadn't risen above 15 degrees Celsius in 2 weeks, and Glacier Lake, normally a pristine mirror reflecting the surrounding mountains, had been frozen solid for over a month. Axel Thompson knew these conditions well. The 35-year-old Navy SEAL veteran, his thick dark beard frosted with ice crystals and his weathered military features hardened by the cold, made his morning patrol around the lake's perimeter with Ranger, the strategist of his legendary Midnight Brotherhood. Ranger moved with the tactical precision that had made him famous in search and rescue operations. His amber eyes constantly scanned the terrain, his ears rotating to catch any sound that didn't belong in the wilderness silence. Even during routine walks, Ranger never stopped being a professional. "Just you and me today, boy," Axel said, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Scout and Angel are staying warm by the fire, but you wanted the adventure." The lake stretched before them like a sheet of white glass, broken only by occasional tracks from wildlife that had crossed during the night. The ice was thick, at least 18 inches according to local rangers, and had been deemed safe for ice fishing and winter recreation. That's what made what happened next so impossible to understand. At 8:47 a.m., Ranger suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. His entire body went rigid, ears locked in position, every muscle tensed with the focus Axel recognized from high-stakes rescue operations. "What is it, Ranger?" Axel asked, immediately shifting into tactical awareness mode. Ranger began moving toward the center of the lake with urgent, purposeful steps, not the cautious movement of a dog testing ice, but the directed approach of a search and rescue dog who had found something critical. Axel followed, his military training keeping him alert for any signs of unstable ice conditions. But the surface beneath their feet was solid, thick, and had shown no signs of weakness anywhere around the lake's perimeter. Ranger stopped approximately 150 yards from shore and began exhibiting behavior Axel had never seen from him before. The dog was digging frantically at the ice surface, whining with increasing urgency, then pressing his ear against the frozen lake as if listening for something. "Ranger, there's nothing here," Axel said, approaching his partner's position. "It's solid ice, boy." "What are you—" That's when he heard it. A sound so faint he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. Tapping. Weak, irregular, desperate tapping coming from beneath the ice. Axel dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to the frozen surface exactly where Ranger had been listening. The sound was unmistakable now. Someone was tapping on the underside of the ice from below. "Jesus Christ," Axel whispered, his mind racing through the impossible physics of what he was hearing. The ice was 18 inches thick. No one could have fallen through. There was no visible break in the surface anywhere. The tapping came again, weaker this time. More desperate, Axel looked into Ranger's eyes and saw the same urgent intelligence that had guided them through dozens of successful rescues. His partner wasn't confused or mistaken. He was trying to save someone. "Okay, boy," Axel said, pulling out his tactical knife and beginning to scrape at the ice surface. "If you say someone's down there, then someone's down there." As he cleared away the thin layer of snow covering the ice, Axel discovered something that stopped his heart, a barely visible crack in the surface, so thin it was almost impossible to see, running in a spiderweb pattern beneath the snow. And in the center of that crack, pressed against the ice from below, was the pale outline of a small hand, a child's hand. The tapping resumed, frantic now, as if the person below could sense help had arrived. But the sound was whacker than before, the intervals between taps growing longer. Axel immediately began calculating survival times for cold water submersion. In water this temperature, a child had maybe 5 to 7 minutes of consciousness before hypothermia took over. But how long had they already been under? "Stay with me," he called through the ice, his voice carrying the command authority he'd used to keep soldiers calm in crisis situations. "Help is here. I'm coming to get you." Using his knife and tactical tools, Axel began working to widen the crack. But 18 inches of ice doesn't break easily, and every second that passed was a second closer to losing whoever was trapped beneath. Ranger positioned himself at the edge of the area, maintaining his alert posture while making soft sounds that seemed designed to comfort whoever was below the surface. That's when Axel realized the most horrifying aspect of the situation. If someone had fallen through this ice, they had fallen through from below, as if they had been trapped under the surface when the lake froze. But that was impossible. The lake had been frozen for weeks, which meant someone had been trapped under this ice for longer than any human could possibly survive. Unless there was something about this situation that defied everything Axel thought he knew about physics, survival, and the limits of human endurance. The tapping stopped. The silence beneath the ice was more terrifying than any enemy fire Axel had faced in 8 years of combat. "No, no, no," he muttered, attacking the ice crack with desperate intensity. His tactical knife, designed to cut through rope and metal, barely scratched the surface of 18-inch thick ice. But Ranger wasn't giving up. The German Shepherd moved to a different spot 6 feet away and began the same frantic digging behavior, his claws sending ice chips flying as he worked to expose another section of the crack. "You're right, boy," Axel realized. "The crack is bigger than I thought." Working together, they revealed a spider web of hairline fractures covering nearly 20 square feet, evidence that something catastrophic had happened here, but so gradually that it had been hidden under the snow. Axel pulled out his emergency gear and began setting charges in a controlled pattern around the weakest section of ice. In SEAL training, he'd learned underwater demolition, but he'd never had to blast through ice to save a drowning child. "If you can hear me down there," he called through the ice while working, "I'm going to make some noise, but then I'm coming to get you. Just hold on." The small explosive charges detonated with muffled cracks, spiderwebbing the ice surface. Axel immediately began hammering with his tactical axe, and finally, the ice gave way. Water darker than midnight rushed up through the hole, and Axel plunged his arm down into the lake. The cold was so intense it felt like his arm was being amputated, but his fingers found fabric, then a small shoulder, then a child, unconscious, blue-lipped, and colder than ice, but definitely alive. Axel hauled the small form out of the water and immediately began emergency resuscitation procedures. The child was a little girl, maybe 7 years old, wearing a bright red winter coat that had probably saved her life by trapping air pockets. "Come on, sweetheart," Axel said, clearing her airway and beginning rescue breathing. "Come back to me." Ranger positioned himself to block the wind while Axel worked, then began making the soft melodic sounds the Midnight Brotherhood used to comfort rescued victims. After what felt like hours but was probably 90 seconds, the little girl coughed up lake water and opened her eyes. They were dark brown, intelligent, and filled with terror. "It's okay, you're safe now," Axel said, immediately wrapping her in his thermal emergency blanket. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Emma," she whispered through chattering teeth. "Emma Chen." The name hit Axel like a lightning bolt. Emma Chen had been reported missing by Kalispell Elementary School 6 hours ago when she hadn't shown up for classes, but the search teams had been looking in the mountains, not the lake. "Emma, how did you get under the ice?" Axel asked while checking her for injuries. I was running," she said weakly. "My daddy was so angry. He said I was a mistake and he wished I was never born. I ran away to the lake because it's where Mommy used to take me before she died." The pieces were starting to form a horrific picture, but Axel needed to focus on keeping Emma alive. Her core body temperature was dangerously low, and she was showing signs of severe hypothermia. "How long were you in the water, Emma?" "I don't know. I fell through when I was trying to get to the middle where Mommy and I used to feed the ducks. But the ice broke and I couldn't get out. I was swimming under the ice for so long trying to find the hole, but it was dark and I got confused." 6 hours. This 7-year-old girl had survived 6 hours under the ice in water that should have killed her in minutes. The air pocket, Axel realized suddenly. You found an air pocket under the ice. Emma nodded weakly. There was a place where the ice went up like a bubble. I could breathe there, but the water was so cold, and I got so tired. As Axel began the careful process of warming Emma and preparing to transport her to medical care, he noticed something that changed everything about the situation. Ranger wasn't just maintaining his protective position. He was staring intently at the tree line on the opposite shore. His ears were up, his body language indicating he'd detected something important. Following Ranger's gaze, Axel spotted a figure standing among the trees, a man watching them through binoculars. The man didn't wave or call out when he realized he'd been seen. Instead, he turned and disappeared quickly into the forest. Emma, Axel said carefully, is your daddy a tall man with a red hat? Emma's eyes went wide with fear. How did you know? Is he here? Is he going to hurt me again? Again. Axel looked at Ranger, who was now showing the alert behavior he displayed when detecting potential threats. Then he looked at the hole in the ice, which was clearly too small for someone to accidentally fall through. Emma, I need you to tell me the truth. How exactly did you end up in that lake? The little girl's eyes filled with tears, and she whispered words that would haunt Axel for the rest of his life. Daddy pushed me. He said it would look like an accident, and then he wouldn't have to take care of his mistake anymore. But I didn't die like he wanted. I found the air bubble, and I waited for someone to save me. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't an accidental drowning. It was attempted murder disguised as a missing child case. Emma's father had tried to kill her and had been waiting 6 hours to make sure she was dead before discovering her body. But he hadn't counted on Ranger's extraordinary hearing, Axel's military training, and a 7-year-old's incredible will to survive. Well, Axel said, looking at Ranger with grim determination, I think it's time Daddy learned that some mistakes he's about to make are going to be permanent. The rescue was complete, but the real mission was just beginning. Getting Emma Chen to medical care was Axel's first priority, but as they reached the shore, the situation became more complicated than a simple rescue operation. Dr. Sarah Martinez from the Kalispell Emergency Clinic met them at the lake access road, having responded to Axel's emergency call. As she began treating Emma's hypothermia in the heated ambulance, the little girl grabbed Axel's hand with surprising strength. Please don't leave me, Emma whispered. What if Daddy comes back? I'm not going anywhere, Axel promised, his weathered military features hardening with protective determination. Ranger and I are going to make sure you're safe. But even as he spoke those words, Axel could see movement in the tree line. David Chen, a tall man in a red hunting cap, was moving through the forest parallel to their position, clearly trying to get close enough to assess the situation. Ranger's body language confirmed what Axel's tactical instincts were telling him. They were being stalked. Doc, how long until Emma's stable enough for transport to the hospital? Axel asked quietly. 20 minutes for initial warming, then we can move her. But Axel, she's going to need counseling as much as medical care. What she's telling me about her home situation. Dr. Martinez shook her head grimly. What exactly has she told you? Daddy hits her when he drinks. Mommy died in a car accident 6 months ago, and he blames Emma for it. Says if they hadn't been driving to Emma's school play, the accident never would have happened. The abuse has been escalating, but there's no other family. Axel felt the familiar cold rage that had served him well in combat situations. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was a small Montana community where a child needed protection from the person who was supposed to love her most. Dr. Martinez, I need you to contact Sheriff Chen immediately. Sheriff Chen? But that's David Chen's brother, Axel finished, which explains why the child abuse reports probably never went anywhere, and why the search for Emma was focused in the mountains instead of the lake where David knew she would be. The conspiracy was deeper than just one abusive father. It involved local law enforcement covering up domestic violence, possibly for months. Ranger suddenly tensed and moved to the window of the ambulance, his ears locked on a position approximately 200 yards northeast. Through the trees, Axel caught the glint of sunlight reflecting off binocular lenses. He's close, Axel said. And he's armed. Dr. Martinez followed Axel's gaze and saw what he was seeing. David Chen moving through the trees with what appeared to be a hunting rifle. "My God," she whispered, "he's going to try to finish what he started." "Not while I'm here," Axel replied, checking his concealed carry weapon and moving toward the ambulance door. "Doc, you get Emma ready for transport. Ranger and I are going to have a conversation with Mr. Chen about his parenting techniques." But Emma heard the discussion and began crying. "Please don't leave me. He said if anyone ever found out what he did, he would hurt them too." Axel knelt beside the little girl and looked into her frightened eyes. "Emma, do you remember how I found you under that ice? How Ranger heard you calling for help when no one else could?" She nodded. "That's what we do. We find people who need help and we make sure they're safe. Your daddy tried to hurt you, but that ends today. Do you trust me?" "Yes," Emma whispered. "Good. Because I promise you this. David Chen will never hurt you or anyone else ever again." Axel stepped out of the ambulance with Ranger at his side and immediately activated the tactical mindset that had kept him alive through countless dangerous operations. David Chen was 200 yards out, armed and moving toward their position through dense forest, but David Chen had never faced a Navy SEAL who was protecting a child. Using hand signals, Axel directed Ranger to circle wide and approach from the northeast while he took a direct route through the trees. It was a flanking maneuver they'd perfected during search and rescue operations, but this time they weren't looking for survivors. They were hunting a predator. Axel moved through the Montana wilderness with the silent precision that had made him one of the most effective operators in SEAL history. His thick, dark beard was frosted with ice, his weathered features set with the kind of determination that made enemies reconsider their life choices. When he was 50 yards from David Chen's position, Axel heard the man talking on a cell phone. "She's alive, Rick," David was saying to someone, presumably Sheriff Chen. "That military guy pulled her out of the lake. We need to clean this up now or everything comes out." "Copy that," came Sheriff Chen's voice over the phone. "I'm en route with a story about a tragic accident during the rescue attempt. Sometimes these heroic rescues go wrong, if you know what I mean." The corruption was worse than Axel had imagined. The Chen brothers were planning to murder both him and Emma to cover up the attempted murder and child abuse. But they'd made one critical error in their planning. They'd assumed they were dealing with a civilian volunteer, not a Navy SEAL with a tactically trained German Shepherd partner. Ranger appeared behind David Chen like a ghost, moving with the silent precision of a military working dog. At Axel's hand signal, Ranger made his presence known with a low growl that froze David Chen in his tracks. "Drop the weapon and turn around slowly," Axel commanded, emerging from cover with his sidearm drawn. "Hands where I can see them." David Chen spun around with the rifle raised, but stopped when he saw Axel's tactical positioning and professional stance. This wasn't some good Samaritan he could intimidate. This was a trained operator. "You don't understand," David said desperately. "My daughter is mentally unstable. She makes up stories. The lake accident was 6 hours ago. You pushed a 7-year-old child through the ice and left her to die," Axel interrupted. "Then you spent 6 hours waiting to make sure she was dead before playing the grieving father. The only accident here is that you're still breathing. She ruined my life. My wife died because of her, and I've been stuck with that brat ever since. Do you have any idea what it's like to—" David Chen never finished the sentence, because some confessions are also suicide notes, and some protectors don't negotiate with child killers. The Frozen Miracle. Part 444. Part 4. Justice in the Frozen Wilderness. What happened in those Montana woods over the next 30 minutes would be investigated by 3 different agencies, but the conclusion was always the same. David Chen fell victim to his own poor decisions in a wilderness environment where tactical experience meant the difference between survival and justice. The confrontation ended when David Chen, in his desperation to silence both Emma and Axel permanently, made the fatal mistake of underestimating a Navy SEAL's protective instincts. His attempt to use the hunting rifle resulted in what the official report would call defensive action, resulting in the neutralization of an armed threat to civilian safety. Ranger's role in the takedown was textbook military working dog precision, disabling the threat without permanent injury but ensuring complete surrender. When Sheriff Rick Chen arrived on scene 20 minutes later with backup, he found his brother in tactical restraints, Axel providing detailed audio recordings of the murder confession, and overwhelming evidence of the conspiracy to cover up child abuse and attempted murder. "You can't prove anything," Sheriff Chen said desperately as Montana State Police investigators arrived to take over the case. "It's his word against a pillar of the community." But Axel had learned a few things about evidence gathering during 8 years of special operations. The audio recordings, the forensic evidence at the lake, Emma's medical examination showing months of abuse, and most importantly, David Chen's own confession, created an airtight case that no amount of local corruption could cover up. 3 months later, David Chen was sentenced to life in prison without parole for attempted murder of a child. Sheriff Rick Chen received 15 years for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to attempted murder. The entire Kalispell County Sheriff's Department was investigated and restructured under federal oversight. But the real victory was happening every day in Axel's Montana cabin. Emma Chen, now legally adopted by Axel Thompson after 6 months of legal proceedings, had found her forever family with the Midnight Brotherhood. The little girl who had survived 6 hours under ice water had also survived a father who tried to kill her and a system that tried to protect her abuser. "Uncle Axel," Emma called from the living room where she was doing homework by the fireplace, surrounded by Scout, Ranger, and Angel in their protective formation. "Can you check my math problems?" Axel looked up from the adoption paperwork he was reviewing, legal documents that would make Emma's place in their family permanent and irrevocable. "Of course, sweetheart," he said, his weathered military features softening with the kind of love that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with choice. Emma Chen Thompson was thriving. The trauma counseling was working, her grades were excellent, and most importantly, she was learning what it felt like to live without fear. The Midnight Brotherhood had become her protectors, companions, and teachers in their own way. Scout had appointed himself Emma's personal guardian, never allowing her to go anywhere alone. Ranger had begun teaching her about tactical awareness and wilderness survival, skills that might save her life someday. Angel had become her emotional support companion, somehow sensing when Emma needed comfort during her healing process. "I've been thinking," Emma said while Axel checked her homework, "about the people who might be in trouble like I was, kids whose parents hurt them, but nobody believes them." "What about them, sweetheart? Could we help them? Like how you and Ranger helped me?" Axel looked at his adopted daughter, a 7-year-old who had survived attempted murder and was now thinking about helping other children in similar situations. Her strength and compassion amazed him every day. "Actually, Emma, that's exactly what we're going to do." 6 months later, the Emma Chen Foundation for Child Protection was established with Axel as director and Emma as the youngest board member in foundation history. The organization specialized in investigating cases where local authorities might be compromised, using the Midnight Brotherhood's search and rescue expertise to locate missing children and provide evidence in abuse cases. Their first case came from a tip about another accident-prone child, whose injuries always seemed to happen when only one parent was present. The second case involved a missing teenager whose disappearance hadn't been properly investigated. The third case exposed a foster care abuse ring that had been operating for years. Emma Chen Thompson, the little girl who had been left to die under the ice, became the voice for children who couldn't speak for themselves. Her foundation saved 17 children in its first year, and the Midnight Brotherhood expanded to include specialized child protection operations. "You know what I learned under that ice?" Emma told Axel one evening as they watched the sunset over Glacier Lake. The same lake where she had almost died, now transformed into a place where they often brought rescued children to show them that surviving trauma could lead to helping others. "What's that, sweetheart?" "I learned that even when everything is dark and cold and scary, if you don't give up calling for help, eventually the right person will hear you. And sometimes that person comes with dogs who sing." Axel looked at Scout, Ranger, and Angel, who were positioned in their eternal triangle formation around Emma as she spoke. The Midnight Brotherhood had found their most important mission, not just rescuing people from physical danger, but rescuing children from the people who were supposed to protect them. "And sometimes," Axel added, "the person you save ends up being the one who teaches you what family really means." Emma smiled and leaned against Axel's shoulder while the Midnight Brotherhood began their soft melodic singing, the sound that had comforted hundreds of people over the years, but never more importantly than it comforted the little girl who had transformed from victim to survivor to protect her. Because sometimes the greatest rescues don't end when you pull someone from danger. They begin when you show them that being saved is just the first step toward building a life worth living. For Emma Chen Thompson, who taught us that survival isn't about enduring the cold, it's about finding the warmth that comes from choosing to protect others. For every child waiting under their own ice for someone to hear their calls for help, keep calling, keep fighting. Your rescue team is coming. For every adult who can choose to be the person who listens when children speak their truth, sometimes being a hero means believing a child when everyone else refuses to. Welcome to the Emma Chen Foundation, where no child's cry for help goes unanswered and every rescue leads to building stronger, safer families. Because the strongest ice can be broken by the right tools, the deepest cold can be warmed by the right love, and the most broken trust can be rebuilt by people who choose to show up when it matters most. One child's survival under impossible conditions. One family's choice to protect instead of harm. One foundation that proves love is stronger than fear, hope is stronger than trauma, and chosen families are often the strongest families of all. We want to hear what you felt while listening to this story. Don't forget to comment and rate the story out of 10.